Hello and welcome to our Voices in Montessori podcast, brought to you by the Greenspring Center for Lifelong Learning. Dr. Montessori said, an education capable of saving humanity is no small undertaking. We agree. So let's get to work. I'm Tamara Sheesley Balis, and in today's episode, we're talking about Montessori's vision of cosmic education and the essence of Montessori and how it has evolved over time and her legacy. My guest today is Dr. Philip Snow Gang, who is the founder of the Institute for Educational Studies, TIES, and its graduate programs in integrative learning and Montessori integrative learning. Dr. Gang is a pioneer in the field of integrative, systemic, and transformative approaches to education. He is the author of Educating for Right Action and Love, Extending and Expanding the Montessori Vision, Rethinking Education, and the co-author of Consciousness Education, The Bridge to Freedom. He is also the developer of the mobile mind mapping simulation, Our Planet, Our Home. He has been a friend of the Montessori family since the mid-1970s. Dr. Gang holds teaching credentials at the 3 to 6 and 6 to 12 levels and was instrumental in the development of Montessori secondary initiatives in the late 70s and 80s. He has also been a trainer of Montessori teachers. So we want to welcome you, Philip. We're so excited to have you on the Voices in Montessori podcast. Thank you so much for being here today. As you know, I'm a student in the TIES program right now and am so enjoying the process of learning and exploring in this way. And so I feel very, very honored that you're here with us today.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here. I've listened to some of your other podcasts and from people I know and said, oh, wow, I didn't know they knew all that.
We have some really impressive guests, don't we?
Yeah.
So today we're talking about what the essence of Montessori is. And I think it's an important topic because it can be really easy to just keep going through and checking boxes and have Montessori be this kind of canned up type of methodology. And that's not what Dr. Montessori was working to create. And so we have the opportunity today to talk about what the essence of Montessori really is. And that's something that really has been a part of your life's work. So can you talk to us about how Dr. Montessori's vision has expanded over time?
Well, let's back step a bit because, I got my training in the 70s in Bergamo, and then I did the 3 to 6 in Atlanta. And I got to know Mario pretty well and his son, Mario Jr. Mario Jr. was on my doctoral committee. And I invited Mario Sr. to a conference in 1981 in Atlanta that we were creating on exploring adolescence. And he came because, in his own words, we had an interview and videotaped it. He said, I came not because I can contribute, but I thought maybe for the last time in my life, I can see the movement moving forward. Mm. So I sent the video finally came out, and I sent it to his then widow because he passed away soon after this video, after this conference. And Ada replied to me, and there was one sentence that stuck out. This was in 82. And she said, I'm afraid that with his passing, the movement will concentrate on the details and forget the essence. Mm-hmm. And so that struck a chord then But it took a long time of my own personal growth, understanding Montessori and learning about life and studying her work to begin to cull that essence.
Mm-hmm.
So your question was about the vision and how it changed over her life, right?
How it expanded.
How it expanded. So, she had a scientific mind. That's how she came into this work. She was an extremely good observer who could look at an experiment or children with what she called without prejudice, to see what was happening now. Today, we might say that's without assumptions, in the words of David Bohm, Krishnamurti, it's to be able to observe without bringing your assumptions in. So she didn't have these preconceived ideas right from the beginning about, this was early on, about how the child would respond. But when she saw how they responded, she created an environment that enabled them to create themselves. It wasn't, she didn't bring something in like other educators and said, this is what children need. She observed the child and brought what they need to them. And so she was not only observing child development, but also human development. And so her eyes eventually expanded to include the future evolution of humanity, because she began to see that through this approach, something unique was happening within the child, and that if more children had this experience, it would develop what she called the new child or the new human. And so, those realizations became evident in her writings during the 1940s, which were mostly, as I know now, lectures that were taken down and transcribed. She rarely sat down to write a book. So one of the challenges with Montessori books is that you have to, sometimes they seem a bit convoluted. It was dependent on who did the translating and what language it was originally translated into.
So she was really initially looking through the lens of child development, it sounds like, and then began to see the impact on humanity from children working in this model. Is that what you're saying?
From children, right. Her first realization was in the 1920s when she began to think about education and peace. And that these children, because of the normalizing process she observed, were going through something that would create a child at peace with itself, And so if that was true, then what? And so she was an avid reader. I mean, she read philosophy and science. And we'll probably get into some of that and how it influenced her. But this idea of normalization, it was an epiphany, because she denoted these traits. And I know a lot of Montessorians today think it's old-fashioned, but it's not. I hear it used more and more in the field of psychology, in physical training. normalizing the body. And so these traits that she pointed to, like collaboration and love of work and repetition and empathy and humility and compassion, independence, cooperation. It was like she saw these and all those going back. That was a new kind of human being that was in process. Mm-hmm. And she saw that as seeds for a new humanity, this normalization process. It's interesting. I wanted to share with you is in 1939, when they were, Montessoris were leaving for India, Mario was in communication with Binda Goldsboro. Binda Goldsboro was a Montessori student in the early 30s, course assistant before and after World War II, and she went to New Zealand. So I met her there, and I knew her for 10 years, and she showed me these letters that she got from Mario in 1939. And in one of them, he says to her, Mama Lena says, do not forget the period of normalization. Before beginning with the materials, it's important that the whole secret of having and not having success lies in the normalization process. Every kind of exercise that will make the child not only master, but also conscious master of its faculties. Mm-hmm. So, he was very close to his mother, and he was writing to her, Binda, what his mother had told him to write.
What are the ways in which you see us stepping away from that, remembering the normalization?
Well, I think it goes back to what Ada Montessori said. There's such a focus today. At least I gather that because I'm not observing classrooms in this country. In New Zealand, yes, but not here. But I get from the teachers in our program who come to our master's program, the pressure that they're under to meet requirements that somebody else has garnered, especially those that are working within the state system. So if there's that intense pressure, and I get it. I mean, my first few years in the classroom, I was not observing without prejudice. I was seeing these manuals and saying, how am I going to get through all this stuff? Mm-hmm. And feeling disappointed at the end of the year. Oh my God, look what I didn't do, right? Mm-hmm. It's so easy for us. But over time, I began to it's a practice that happens with self-development, losing the sense of I, and losing your own ego, and then being able to observe the child the way she was able to. Mm-hmm. And then you would see these processes that are coming out within the child and respond to them rather than the next lesson they must have. It might be the next lesson, but it might be going outside and looking at a flower. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Or planting some seeds. Mm-hmm.
So what advice do you have for those people who are in the classroom and who are trying to adhere to the essence of Montessori? How do they do that amongst the pressures of modern day society and
challenging?
It is challenging.
I mean, my first response was to get out of your own way. And so you may not be able to do it all day long, but certainly when you walk into the classroom first thing in the morning, you can leave something at the door
Mm-hmm.
and just watch, I was able to do that after time and just watch the children come into the classroom and see what they chose. And of course, there were always a percent that I had to make sure I interrupted at the door, because I knew if I didn't help them direct themselves, I'd be in trouble. They'd be in trouble. I would say there's about 20%.
Mm-hmm. Well,
But
it's
more or
what
less,
they are and what their needs are.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
right. And that came from observation.
It's
I never forget, at the school that Marsha and Pauline started in New Zealand, they were, when the children came into the classroom, there was a note on the table. This was an elementary class, that do not disturb, we're observing. And so the teachers thought they would do that for an hour or so,
wow.
you know? But after an hour, they looked at each other and said, hmm. And it just went all morning. And they were like gobsmacked. And at the end of the morning, the children gathered themselves in a circle and dismissed themselves to go out on the playground.
Mm. The children were working as if the teacher did not exist.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what does that mean? It means faith in the child, which is repeated throughout Montessori's works. And it's so hard to have when you have the pressure of somebody saying, has this child gotten to abstraction yet?
Mm-hmm.
But what we're looking for is, I'll never forget, this child came to me and said, I can do the checkerboard without the checkerboard. And I stood there for a second and realized she was telling me she had learned how to multiply abstractly
Mm-hmm.
by herself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
My first inkling into all of this was before I was even a teacher. And my son and daughter were in a Montessori school. And my son came home one day, I think he was 5, and he told me he could read. And I opened the book, my book I was reading, and he started reading it. And I said, who taught you this? And he said, I taught myself. I mean, that was a life-changing moment for me.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like there's something more going on
Mm-hmm.
in this school, in this world of Montessori. And at the time, I was a industrial manufacturing engineer in industry.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hanging out more and more in the Montessori school. And one day I just said, I might become a Montessori teacher one day. And the teacher said that I was talking to, he said, why not now? And I just rush went through my body. And 6 weeks later, I was in Italy.
That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
amazing. And that's often how it works for folks. It's a calling. We're called to it. It feels so profoundly grateful to be in something that is so mission driven, and that every single day I know that the work we're doing is important and valuable and making a difference in the world.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit, Philip, about the ways that the discovery of the normalizing process was revelatory?
I think I actually touched on that in the expansion of the previous question,
Oh, okay.
because really it was like, oh, these are traits. Why don't normal children have these traits?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what led to the opening of the cognitive meeting in 1907. And then it's what led to the expansion of the 3 to 6 into the 6 to 12. In the early days, Montessori didn't discriminate. She had some older children. And so Mario told me this, the classrooms were not divided just by shelves. And so the younger children would wander into the older children environment. And they would like put together and take apart and put together the binomial and trinomial cube. And so that became sensorial material in the 3 to 6 classroom. Up to then, it was just for 6 to 12.
And that came out of her really observing and paying attention and seeing what they were drawn to.
Exactly.
I had the most beautiful moment today just watching a child. There were 2 children doing the pink tower, and they were doing it just the way it had been presented. And this little tiny person came by, and she sat down and asked him, "Can I work with you?" And they said yes. And so she started doing it, and she took, and it was amazing. I'd never seen it done, but she took a larger one and then a smaller one and then a larger one and a smaller one all the way up and patterned it. And then she said, "Look, it's big and then small and then big and then small." And she managed to create it so that it didn't topple. And I thought, that is the most beautiful rendition of the tower that I've seen. And it came out of her using it to create a pattern. It wasn't about her doing it right. It was about her exploring the material, which is exactly what Dr. Montessori was asking us to do for our children.
And that's how a lot of the extensions evolved. They weren't ideas that Montessori presented, but it was from her observing children. I've seen some incredible extensions with the sensorial material, observing classes in Italy at Madame Paolini's school. She was a first generation trainer and with Montessori. And she was quite amazing.
So do you think we're too dependent on the lessons, Philip? I mean, really, when I'm thinking about it, are we too dependent on, and I don't think there's a right answer here, but when we look at the child and we're really looking to meet each child just where they are, we can't put them through, it's not a cookie cutter experience.
Oh, no. When a child is interested or drawn to a material that they haven't been presented and they need to go through a sequence before they get presented, there's no reason for them not to experience something with that material. It may not be the lesson, but it could be as little as dusting it or as much as putting it away in a sequence. But we have to respond to the child, I mean, I can think of so many stories.
I'm sure. And I think that that's a really important piece for us to remember, is we can get caught in trying to, and listen, every single Montessori guide, the truth is guides are trying to do the right thing all the time and support their children in every possible way. And we have to remember that exactly that moment where they say, "I want to do this work." And we have the opportunity to say, "Oh, wow, well, would you like to dust it? Would you like to work with this small part of it? Let's get this out," and really meet them, because every time we deflect their curiosity and deflect their interest and prolong it, there is a part of them that can shut down. It has to be done with such, it's an artistry, and you're an artist and a scientist.
Totally. And also another option would be to have them observe someone else doing it,
That's right.
I also want to kind of emphasize the role of the classroom assistant. and their training. Because when we were talking about the pink tower, I always flash on this, and I was like in shock for days, actually. But I was sitting in the classroom, and the assistant came by, and the child had built the pink tower, I don't know how many times, 3 or 4 times. Put it together, taken it apart, put it together, taken it. And the assistant said, when you get tired, you can put it away. So
the seed, right? Planting the seed of tiredness, planting the seed of them needing to put it away and interrupting the concentration, all the things. And I think we just have to spell that out, because if we have folks who are new to Montessori, they may not understand
that's
why
it.
wouldn't want to do that.
Right. The training of the assistants
is critical.
And I guess that's why Montessori in the beginning didn't want any assistants.
You know.
And that came much later through regulations.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I have to tell you, I can't imagine running our community without assistants. Our assistants are a critical, vital part of our community that adds so much, and they deserve the training. They deserve the training. So I want to take us, if you don't mind, Philip, I want to talk about cosmic education, which I know is for you an area of that you've really explored quite a bit. Can you talk about how the concept of cosmic education was formed and what impact it had on Dr. Montessori's life work?
Right. Great. I have spent a lot of time.
You have.
Thinking about it. You know, I did the training and people kept talking about cosmic education. But even after the training, I had no idea what it was. I mean, I had some lessons, but I didn't get the connection.
I didn't either, for what it's worth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's the preparation of the trainer as well. So people who came to Montessori, and this is part of the story, they got this. So, you know, she was, as I said, an avid reader. And she was informed first by evolutionary biologist Julian Huxley. I think he wrote Stream of Life 1926, talking about how life works. But the most profound influence was from a paleontologist and geologist, Antonio Stoppani. Now, this is no relationship to her mother's family, as initially thought, which were the Stoppanis. But the research I've done is they haven't been able to validate that. But Stoppani wrote this book and influenced Montessori tremendously, because it showed how all of Earth's systems work together. And, you know, how the cycles of life, organic and inorganic on Earth, make this place we live on a miracle. Mm-hmm. And she thought the teachers should know this. So at the end of her 1935-36 course, she added 6 lectures on cosmic education, where she basically gave them the ideas of Antonio Stoppani. But she repeated several times that this is not for you to teach children. This is your preparation as a teacher, that you need to know this. And why would she say that? You know, I thought a lot about that. Well, anybody that understands how all of this comes together and how it's quite a miracle, you know. Mm-hmm. And if you're bringing that sense of miracle into the classroom, it's a different mindset that you're introducing the child to. And you're allowing their exploration of nature to be integral to what they're doing with the materials. So that's what happened in the 30s. And then in the 40s, well, in 1939, she went to India. She was going to do a 3-month course. She was invited by the Theosophical Society. She stayed at their compound. And the war opened, and she had an Italian passport. So she was not able to travel home. And she was not able to travel home until 1946. So she was in India for 7 years at that time. But the Indian experience was so profound, she came back, gave those 1946 lectures in England, and then went back to India for another year.
Mm.
And so she was introduced to an Eastern perspective. But she had in her library, and she depended on the philosophy, steeped in the philosophy of two Western philosophers, William James, and the other one was a French philosopher, Henri Bergson. So William James and Henri Bergson, who both talked about cosmic consciousness. So she had that idea. And then she saw it in the way the Indians practice life, you know. I mean, it wasn't as like she was a part of the Indian culture, but she lived in a theosophical compound, which was a home for all the great religions, East and West. And so she inculcated what was happening there. And this idea of cosmic education being just related to the earth morphed into being related to the cosmos and universe. And so that affected her deeply. And I think if one wants to really understand it, you can read To Educate the Human Potential. And the last chapter of our last book, The Absorbent Mind. Yeah, because she goes into some of these things there.
Now, you said that originally her lectures were designed, she said, this is for you for the spiritual preparation of the adult. Yet now we give this work in many ways to our students, particularly at the elementary level. We're offering them, our hope is to offer them the cosmos and have them be excited by the interconnectedness of all living things.
So I can share how that came about.
Oh, we would love to hear that.
So they were not relegated to an inside environment, right? Mm-hmm. They had these older children outside. And it was through Mario's observations of these children in nature that he would come back. He was working with Lena Wick-Mamaratne, who was a woman that took a course in one of the first courses in India in 39 and stayed with the Montessoris. And she later came to the United States. But they would come back and report what they saw, observed. And so Montessori said, well, if these children are looking at these kinds of things, we need to create lessons that help them understand how these things work, cosmic education of the earth, and then later on, how they came into being, which is the story of the universe, which is elucidated in To Educate the Human Potential. And so in 1949, she gave Mario this first story called The God Without Hands. And that was really the story of the coming of the universe, told through a series of experience in story form. The other great lessons that have evolved were not Maria Montessori's. They were done by second generation trainers with Mario later on.
Mm.
So
So
a lot of
planted the seed.
sorry.
She planted the seed for them.
She planted the seed with the God without hands.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And she really recognized that we needed to bring this to our children, because I have to share with you, I think it's part of the most important part of our work is to help our children feel connected with the cosmos and with life beyond themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And she encouraged us to write stories. And that's what Mario didn't write the stories, but he was in collaboration with others who wrote them. And so, you know, people stop with these 5 great lessons, but who's to say they're the greatest, you know? There still are other lessons that, you know, we had one in Bergamo that I thought was a great lesson, but it not part of the canon. It's called The Story of the Great River. I don't know if it's even told anymore, but it's how the human body works. And then I know Marcia created one. It wasn't a very long one, but it was a story about she called it I Obey. And Maria Montessori refers to that in To Educate Human Potential. And this I Obey is telling in story form the story of calcium carbonates looking for somebody to blame, and they are all obeying the laws of the universe. And children love it. You can find it on, we have it on YouTube or Venmo or something.
That and there are other scientific theories and hypotheses that have evolved after her passing. Do you want to talk a little bit more about some of those?
Yeah. In a way, I don't think we realized the significance of her contributions. I'm sure we have.
Still, to this day?
To this day. I mean, you know, in the 60s, Lynn Margulies and Jim Lovelock came together and they created the Gaia hypothesis, which is now the Gaia theory, because it's no longer a hypothesis. They now have evidence of how all the cycles on Earth work together, which now has formed something we call the Earth system science. And Earth system science is taught at the university level. You can get books on it, but it's not, maybe it's taught in secondary school, but it's this cosmic story that we tell children, but in scientific form. So she was way ahead of it with the Gaia theory.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was in Fritjof Capra's 1996 book. He talks about the work of Francesco Varela and Umberto Maturana, the Santiago theory of cognition. And he elaborates on this word called autopoiesis, which is a scientific term that say that life really creates itself in the environment. And Marcia thought about this a long time. And that in a Montessori environment, the children are self-creating all the time by structurally coupling to the materials. And when they do that, something happens, the normalizing process, and something evolves that's greater than the child. Something new evolves. You're in the second semester of our program, and in the next semester, you'll have an opportunity to observe this yourself.
I'm looking forward to that.
Because in a way, Tamara, we didn't know it at the time, but when we created this program, it mimicked the Montessori process. So just like the Montessori environment builds on itself, one lesson builds on the next, builds on the next, is an indirect preparation, almost in a spiral. So does our syllabus.
Mm-hmm.
And you come back and revisit things that you had earlier and then say, oh, now I see that. It reminds me of a story I have to tell you. My son was 11 years old and or 12, and he was in the last year of an elementary program, and he was being taught cube root. And he came home and he says, now I know what a cube is. Now, you know, he saw the first cube with the pink tower, right? When he was doing it. But he knew it. And that's what happens in the Montessori environment. And it happens, I think, in the process we've created within times. So
I have to, yeah, I agree with that. I do. There's a 25-page paper that we wrote over the summer, and I really, first of all, you pick a topic, and I was so invested in what I was writing. I cared about it so deeply. There's not a grade. It was about actually getting as much from it as I could and sharing as much of my process as I could. And it really felt, the whole process has felt very Montessori-esque. The quality of the people that you have supporting the programs who are working with us is very high quality folks. And it's just, I agree with you. It feels very Montessori. And it's the first time I've had the experience of being a Montessori student in that way, really. So I thank you for that.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you exactly how this happened, how the Montessori integrated learning degree happened. We had a woman from, who was the head of a Montessori school in Maui. This was before the Montessori integrated learning. It was just integrated learning. And she looked at us and she said, you know, you really created Montessori for adults. And so we looked at each other and thought, what else did we know, right?
That's right. That's right.
So it manifested itself. And that's when we went to the university and said we want to morph into two offerings, one in integrated learning and one in Montessori integrated learning. In the 1920s and 1930s, we had people like Teilhard de Chardin, Edward Leroy, and Edward Leroy preceded them, and Vladimir Vernadsky in Russia, who we didn't know his work until much later. But they were all talking about the existence of a sphere beyond the biosphere. And they gave it the name noosphere, N-O-O-S, noosphere.
Mm-hmm.
It's a sphere of human consciousness. And so this was an inheritance of Thomas Berry through Chardin. And Thomas Berry gave it to Brian Swim, and Brian Swim now has a series, I think it's on YouTube. It's the Human Energy Project, where it's a video series on the development of the noosphere. Having said that, in Montessori's last lecture, public lecture in 1950, she talked about a psychosphere, which was denoted a domain where there's only one civilization that represents the unity of humankind. And when I asked her great-granddaughter, was there any book she was thinking of writing before she passed, and she said she found a letter that she had written, Montessori had written to a colleague, that said she was thinking about writing a book on psycho-humanity.
On what? I'm sorry. Can you repeat that?
That's in Italian. It's psychological man, psycho-humanity. You know, we have psychogeometry, psychoarithmetic,
Mm-hmm.
psycho-humanity, where this idea of the psychosphere would be explored.
Mm-hmm.
So you asked earlier about cosmic education. It just expanded and expanded and expanded.
Well, I think Dr. Montessori would have been enraptured by Brian Swim. I think they would have been fast friends had she been around now. And the truth is that she would have continued to have all of this new information that we have about how things fit together would have been integrated into the education model. She was not a stagnant human.
Totally.
And you've spoken to that even today about how she took new information and continued to build and integrate what she was doing. So I really appreciate that you are continuing that effort as well, and really bringing us as Montessorians and educators into a conversation that really expands our consciousness and what we see as the work.
I talked earlier about Binda Goldsboro. She used to come to our house every Friday night and watch Brian Swim videos and Thomas Berry videos. And that chair behind me was hers. She said, "Oh, keep that empty for me." But anyway, I have a video clip I'll send you. It's about 2 minutes long of what she says about our work and Montessori's work and Montessori's how Montessori would have appreciated Swim and Berry.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. For sure. I completely agree. And I think she would have made sure that that work, that Thomas Berry's work, that Brian Swim's work was incorporated into the model. And so that's our work as Montessorians, is making sure that we are really inclusive and inclusive of this new information, and ensure that we have an expanded consciousness around the role.
Yeah, one more little story about that.
Yeah, please.
So, Brian Swim, he was laughing when he was telling me this. He said, after he and Barry had published the Universe story together, Barry called, you may have heard the story, Brian Swim, and said, "We've been scooped by 50 years. Maria Montessori wrote all about this and to educate the human potential."
Wow. No, I hadn't heard that story. I love that story.
Yeah.
She was really an extraordinary, extraordinary human being. And gosh, how grateful I am for her each and every day. I know we all are. Do you want to share what you feel like her legacy is?
Well, it's a big ask. I think that her legacy is way beyond education, way beyond what we think about. But it's really a hope in the future. They'll see it as a means of developing the new human, sowing the seeds for the development of the new human and a new culture. And that the destiny of all humanity originated in the fireball and in the beginning, and through attraction, which was there at the very beginning, it created us, who we are here and now. And that legacy could change the world. And my hope is eventually we will live through these inconceivably challenging times, and won't be perhaps in our lifetimes.
No.
But there will be a string of humanity that survives to keep this story alive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very well said. That was a big question. You did.
Yeah. As I said earlier, I didn't have any answers for these questions when I wrote them.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for spending your time with us today, and really for your life's work, which has been to expand consciousness in education. And thank you for sharing some of your wisdom with us and helping us to understand the essence of Montessori and what it is that she was all about. I really, really appreciate it.
And I have a lot of gratitude for your the work you're doing and your insights and responses to my responses. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. To our listeners, thank you for spending your time with us today. Your work is so important and making such a difference in the world. Take a look at our website, greenspringcenter.org, to view the show notes from today's episode and to get more information on how Greenspring can support you and your practice. We've also included a link to the TIES Institute on the show notes page so you can learn more about this innovative program. Listeners, make sure you subscribe to our podcast and support the work of bringing the experts to you. The work you do is important, and we're here to help. Join us next time.